The crowded room buzzed with anxious whispers as the general eyed the young woman across the table. Her sharp gaze skimmed over the worn badge she flashed quickly before anyone else could react. The general scoffed silently, mocking the crude emblem. But before he could dismiss her, the woman spoke calmly, yet with a steel edge in her voice that promised secrets far beyond their understanding. Suddenly the doors burst open, and an unexpected figure entered. Leaving everyone frozen in place, the air felt thick and heavy as the general shifted uneasily in his chair. His eyes never left the woman standing there. She was out of place in this austere room where men in dark suits and military uniforms congregated. Their expressions were tight and watchful, as if guarding truths too dangerous to speak aloud. The woman stood with her shoulders squared and chin raised. Her clothes were simple, yet purposeful. Her eyes darted around the room, quickly taking in every detail like a predator sizing up its prey. Her name was Ilara, a name whispered in certain circles, but dismissed as a myth by most. She was known only to a handful, and only by reputation as a ghost who operated in shadows that even government officials feared to approach. The badge she held was not just any badge. It was said to carry authority bestowed by powers that could topple governments. Yet no one here seemed to believe it. The general cleared his throat and motioned for silence. His voice was low, but carried the weight of command and skepticism. "You think you can just walk in here and claim what you are not," said he, his eyes narrowing. "You want to show us your badge and expect respect. What makes you think this room answers to you?" Ilara smiled faintly. The smile did not reach her eyes, but it was enough to unsettle those who watched. She placed the badge carefully on the table, its surface catching the dim light and revealing intricate engravings that no one had expected. The presidential seal was unmistakable, but the room was silent, unable to react because disbelief had frozen their tongues. The general leaned forward. The slow motion of his hand reaching out made everyone tense. He was about to swipe the badge away to expose the fake, but then he paused. His fingers hovered as a flicker of doubt crossed his features. Could this be real, or was it an elaborate trick crafted by some clever imposter? Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the sharp clang of the heavy door opening. A tall figure strode in with purposeful steps. A man dressed in a tailored suit whose presence demanded attention. The room seemed to shrink as all eyes turned toward him. His expression was unreadable, but his gaze locked onto Ilara with a strange mixture of curiosity and caution. The general stiffened and whispered, low enough said to the man. The newcomer nodded and spoke with a voice that brooked no argument. "Come with me," said he, directed at Ilara and the general. "It is time we spoke, where no one else can hear." The two men exchanged glances, and then the general reluctantly rose from his seat. Motioning to the security detail to remain alert, he followed the newcomer and Ilara out into the dimly lit corridor. The heavy door thudded closed behind them, leaving the room filled with questions and a growing sense of unease. Inside the corridor, the atmosphere was tense. The walls seemed to close in as the three figures walked briskly past surveillance cameras and guarded checkpoints. Their footsteps echoed off the cold stone floor. The general kept stealing glances at Ilara, trying to decipher her expression, but she remained unreadable like a book locked tight. Finally, they reached a small private office where the newcomer gestured for them. To enter the room was stark, but equipped with communication devices and screens that showed real-time data feeds. The man closed the door behind them and turned to face the general and Ilara. He introduced himself as Director Harlan, a high-ranking official whose loyalty was known to few. The general recognized the name but had never met him in person before. Harlan looked at Ilara and then the general. His eyes narrowed as he said, "This is not a game, Ilara. If what you say is true, the consequences could ripple through the very fabric of this administration." Ilara nodded her head slowly and reached inside her coat, pulling out a small black case. She opened it to reveal the presidential seal mounted on a polished backing. Its craftsmanship was exquisite and unmistakable. The general stared for a long moment, unable to speak. His mind raced, trying to reconcile what he had mocked moments ago with the undeniable reality before him. Harlan folded his arms and asked in a measured tone, "Why come here now? Why reveal yourself at a time when trust is fragile and enemies lurk in every shadow?" Ilara met his gaze and answered, "Because the threat is closer than you realize. Because the shadows you fear are already inside your ranks." The general felt a chill crawl up his spine as the words hung heavy in the air. Ilara moved to a nearby console and activated a series of images and documents encrypted with layers of security. The screens flickered, revealing faces and names tied to a conspiracy that reached far beyond simple espionage. Harlan and the general leaned in to study the data, their skepticism giving way to grim understanding. The room seemed to grow colder as the implications sank in. Secrets long buried were rising like ghosts, demanding reckoning. But before they could voice their fears, a faint sound drifted through the walls, a whisper of movement that suggested they were not alone. Ilara turned sharply toward the door and motioned for silence. The general reached for his sidearm, but Harlan held up a hand, signaling caution. The threat was unseen, but unmistakably present. Their brief alliance, forged in mistrust, was about to be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. Outside the heavy door, the corridor lay still, but the shadows seemed deeper, darker, as if hiding eyes that watched and waited for the perfect moment to strike. The room where they left the others hummed with tension and uncertainty. The night had only just begun, and the battle for truth was about to unfold in a deadly dance of secrets and lies. The heavy door shut behind them, sealing the room in darkness, save for the pale glow of screens that flickered with coded information. The silence was thick with unspoken questions. As the general studied Ilara, her eyes calm but alert, like a predator waiting for the next move. Her badge glinted faintly in the low light, a symbol of authority and mystery that challenged everything. He thought he knew. Director Harlan moved to a console, tapping rapidly on the keys, pulling up maps, encrypted files, and messages that seemed to pulse with urgency. The images were fragmented, but the pattern was clear. A network of operatives hidden deep within government agencies, weaving a web of influence that threatened to unravel the fragile peace they had fought to maintain. The general felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach, realizing the depth of betrayal that lay before them. Ilara stepped forward, her voice steady yet urgent. "We have very little time," she said. "Our enemies are not just outsiders, but shadows inside these halls. They have infiltrated every level, and their goal is to seize control of the presidency from within. They move quietly but decisively, erasing any who stand in their way." Harlan glanced at the general, his face grim. "This is treason of the highest order," he said. "They must be stopped before it is too late. The question is, who can we trust?" The general nodded slowly, his mind racing. Who else knows about this? Who else is involved? Ilara looked at him, her eyes dark with warning. "Not many," she replied, "and some of those you trust most may be the very ones who seek your downfall." The room felt smaller with every word spoken. Their fragile alliance, weighed down by the invisible enemies lurking just beyond their sight. Suddenly, a faint noise echoed from the hallway, the soft sound of footsteps moving deliberately as if searching for them. The three froze, their breath caught in their throats. The threat was closer than they had imagined, Harlan whispered. "We need to move now. If they find us here, it will mean the end." Ilara agreed quickly, shutting down the screens and grabbing her coat. The general reached for his weapon, but Harlan held out a hand. "Stop," said he. "We cannot start a firefight in this corridor. We need information, not a war." They slipped out quietly, the corridor stretching before them, dimly lit and silent, except for the echo of their footsteps. The air was tense-charged. With anticipation, the general glanced around, noticing cameras that blinked red and shadows that seemed to shift unnaturally. The building that once felt like a fortress now seemed like a labyrinth designed to trap them. Ilara led the way, her knowledge of the building evident as she took shortcuts and avoided security patrols. They moved quickly, passing locked doors and deserted offices until they reached a secure elevator. The general pressed the button and the doors slid open, revealing a cramped interior with dim lights and a control panel covered in buttons and switches. As they descended, the elevator hummed softly, but the silence was broken by a sudden burst of static from the communication device on Harlan's belt. A distorted voice crackled through a garbled message, then cut off abruptly. The general frowned. "Someone is trying to reach us, but the connection is bad," said Harlan. He tapped the device again, hoping for a clearer signal. Ilara frowned. She took the device and adjusted the frequency. Her fingers moved deftly as she worked to clear the interference. Then a voice emerged, clear and urgent. "This is Agent Cole reporting in. The operation is compromised. We need immediate extraction. Repeat, extraction. Compromised. They are coming for us." The three exchanged tense looks. The name Cole was familiar to the General A field agent, known for his unorthodox methods and deep cover assignments. If he was compromised, it meant the situation had escalated beyond their worst fears. Ilara said, "We have to find him before they do." The general nodded, ready to act, but a sudden jarring halt stopped the elevator mid-descent. The lights flickered and dimmed, plunging them into near darkness. The hum of machinery was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the distant sound of footsteps approaching. The general cursed under his breath and moved toward the control panel, trying to override the emergency stop. But the system was locked down. Harlan looked at Ilara, his eyes sharp. "We are trapped," he said. "Whoever is behind this is prepared. They know we are here, and they want to control the outcome." Ilara took a deep breath and scanned the small panel beside the door, spotting a manual release lever. She pulled it with a firm yank, and the elevator shuddered before sliding open to reveal a narrow maintenance shaft. Without hesitation, Ilara stepped into the shaft and motioned for the others to follow. The space was cramped and dark, their footsteps muffled by the thick walls. The air smelled stale, and the faint hum of electrical currents buzzed softly around them. As they climbed down the shaft, their minds raced with questions. Who was behind the infiltration? And how deep did the conspiracy run? The general could not shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed alive with menace. Every sound carried the weight of impending danger. Suddenly, a faint light appeared below, signaling the exit of the shaft. They reached a heavy door, and Ilara quickly bypassed the security lock with a device pulled from her pocket. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit underground corridor. They moved cautiously through the tunnel, its walls lined with pipes and wiring that hummed with energy. The corridor twisted and turned like a serpent hiding secrets in its coils. Suddenly, a distant sound reached their ears, the unmistakable echo of voices raised in alarm. The threat was closing in faster than they could escape. Ilara stopped, signaling for silence. The general readied his weapon, and Harlan scanned the shadows. The corridor ahead split into two paths, one leading deeper underground, the other heading toward a set of stairs that might lead outside. Their decision had to be quick. They chose the stairs as they ascended the steps. The sounds grew louder. The pounding of boots and shouted orders reverberated through the walls. The exit was near, but so was danger. The general pushed the door open, just as a squad of armed men rounded the corner. their eyes blazing with determination to capture or kill. A fierce struggle erupted in the narrow stairwell. The general fought with trained precision. Harlan covered their backs, and Alara used quick thinking to disable an attacker with a sudden strike. The chaos seemed endless, but the three managed to break through the line, bursting out into the cold night air, breathing heavily. The trio looked around, realizing they had escaped only the first wave. The real battle was still ahead, and the stakes were higher than any of them could have guessed. The night was silent for a moment as they disappeared into the shadows, knowing that every move from now on could be their last. The cold night air hit them like a slap, awakening every nerve as they melted into the shadows beyond the stairwell. The city was alive with distant sounds, sirens wailing, cars rushing by, and the low murmur of voices from nearby streets. But here, in this dark alley, the three moved with purpose, their breaths quick and measured. Alara clutched the small case containing the presidential seal, her fingers tightening around its edges as if drawing strength from its weight. The general glanced over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the labyrinth of alleys and fire escapes they had slipped into. This was no longer a simple game of espionage, but a deadly chase where every step could bring them face to face with unseen enemies. Harlan was silent beside them, his expression grim but resolute, the burden of leadership settling heavily on his shoulders. Alara broke the silence finally. "We need to get to the safe house," she said. "The files and images we saw are just the beginning. The conspiracy runs deeper, and if we do not act fast, many more lives will be lost." The general nodded grimly. He knew the safe house well, a nondescript building in the heart of the city with underground access and no cameras. It was the only place where they could regroup and plan their next move. As they moved through the winding streets, their path was lit only by the flickering glow of street lamps, casting long shadows that danced with every step. The city seemed indifferent to their plight, unaware that a silent war was raging beneath its surface. The general's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of betrayal and deceit that had brought them here. Suddenly, Alara stopped motioning for them to halt. She raised a finger to her lips and pointed to a narrow alleyway where faint footsteps echoed softly. The general drew his weapon silently, signaling for Harlan to cover the rear. They pressed themselves against the brick walls, blending with the darkness as the footsteps grew louder. A group of men clad in black tactical gear appeared, their faces obscured by masks, their movements precise and coordinated. The general recognized the insignia of a covert paramilitary unit rumored to operate outside official channels. Their mission was clear: capture or eliminate. Without warning, the attackers split into two groups, one moving down the alley, the other flanking from the side. The general fired the first shot, his aim steady and true. The fight erupted into chaos, bullets ricocheting off metal, dumpsters, and shattered glass. The three defenders fought fiercely, using every skill they possessed, but the enemy was relentless. Alara ducked behind a stack of crates, pulling a small device from her pocket and activating a blinding flash. The attackers stumbled momentarily, allowing the general and Harlan to counterattack, but the fight was far from over. As the last of the assailants fell, the silence returned heavy and uneasy, breathing hard. Alara said, "We cannot stay here. The enemy knows where. We are headed. The safe house has been compromised." The general cursed under his breath and looked to Harlan, who nodded grimly. They had to change plans fast or risk walking into a trap. Alara produced a small encrypted phone, her fingers flying over the keys, sending a distress signal to an unknown contact. The reply was almost instantaneous, a voice crackling through the static with a single word: "Rendezvous." The general frowned. They had no choice but to trust this unknown ally. the night was, closing in and their options dwindling. They moved quickly, avoiding main streets and surveillance cameras, using back alleys and hidden passages until they reached a secluded park where a black SUV waited its engine, idling silently. The driver, a woman with sharp eyes and a knowing smile, greeted them without questions. The general felt a flicker of hope but knew better than to relax too soon. As they drove through the city, the conversation was sparse but loaded with tension. Harlan finally spoke. "We have to find Cole." He said the field agent was the key to unraveling the conspiracy. If he was captured or worse, the entire operation could collapse. Ilara nodded. "I have contacts who might know his location, but getting to him will not be easy." The SUV slowed near an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The driver killed the engine and the trio slipped out, moving cautiously through the shadowed streets. The warehouse loomed like a forgotten giant, its walls scarred by time and neglect. The general felt a chill as memories of past missions flooded his mind. This place was a crossroads of secrets and danger. Inside the warehouse, the air was thick with dust and the faint smell of oil. Their footsteps echoed ominously as they searched for any sign of Cole. Suddenly, a faint noise came from the far corner, a soft cough or whisper. The general motioned for silence and moved forward, his weapon raised. They found Cole slumped against a crate, his clothes torn and face bruised but alive. The relief was short-lived as he gasped out warnings of a mole within their ranks, someone who had betrayed them from the inside. The room seemed to close in as the weight of the betrayal settled over them heavier than any chains. Cole handed over a small data chip containing evidence that could topple powerful figures. The general examined it carefully, knowing this was the weapon they needed to strike back, but also the target that would put them all in danger. The safe house was no longer safe, and time was running out. Ilara looked at the general, her voice steady but urgent. "We have to move. The enemy is closing in faster than we anticipated. Their next move will be crucial." The general nodded, gripping the chip tightly, and glancing at Harlan, who gave a curt nod. They prepared to leave, knowing that every second counted, and that the shadows around them were growing darker and more dangerous by the minute. As they exited the warehouse, a distant siren wailed, cutting through the night like a blade. The city held its breath, unaware that a storm was gathering, and that its fate rested in the hands of three unlikely allies, bound by trust and the fragile hope of justice in a world of deception. The night pressed down on them like a suffocating shroud as they slipped from the warehouse into the maze of back streets. The general led the way, clutching the data chip tightly, his senses sharpened to every sound. Every shadow seemed to twitch with unseen menace, and every breath carried the weight of looming danger. Ilara and Harlan flanked him, their faces grim but determined. They moved swiftly, avoiding the main roads where cameras and patrols were sure to watch. Their plan was simple yet perilous reach. The secondary safe house, a hidden bunker beneath an abandoned subway station, where they could analyze the data and plan their counterstrike. The city around them was unaware that beneath its surface, the fate